Hi, Intuitive viewers. Thank you for coming today. I am thrilled to have with us today Nancy from Nancy Jean's Garden. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
She's also from crystaldirections.com, and she is a psychic intuitive tarot reader. And we're going to kind of start there. And she's a master of crystals, which we'll get to. But Nancy, I kind of want to start at the beginning of this, the journey of getting to crystals. So tell us about your kind of what drew you to the tarot cards and how that relationship with the tarot cards started for you.
Okay, it started at slumber parties. I started reading when I was 12. And
Oh
everybody had
my
a
gosh.
deck of cards at their house. Thank God we didn't have Ouija boards because we'd all dived into that too. Anyway, what we found out was and I just had the little white book to go along with a regular Rider Waite deck. And
Mhm.
I'd read the cards and they'd make sense. And other kids would pick the cards up and they'd go, I don't get anything from this. But it wasn't my friends my own age who really noticed what I could do. It was their older teenage sisters. I'm a boomer. I'm in the middle of the World War II boom of babies. And everybody had a ton of teenage sisters and friends and brothers and stuff. So I'd read. I remember one girl came up to me and she said, oh, oh, tell me about Tony. And so I laid out the cards and I said, oh, Tony has a really nice blonde friend. Well, her sister wasn't blonde. And anyway, later in junior high, the girl whose house it was at, she came and said, how'd you know about Tony? My sister found out he's been cheating on her and man, there's been hell to pay. And I was like, how did you know that? And I said, I didn't know that. Because I'd always sort of assumed I knew what was going on with the cards because everybody kind of was in everybody's business in the 50s and 60s. That was what we did. And so I kept touch with them. And I found out later in life from my parents that they always knew I was special. They always knew I was different. They didn't know what the hell to do with it. So, but they would, like my father told me when I was in my late 50s, early 60s, that he would, when my mom would lose her rings, she'd take her rings off to do something in the house. We lived in a big old Edwardian house. And he'd come to me and say, where's mama's rings? And I just tell him, and they'd be on a shelf. This is when I was a little bitty. They'd be on a shelf I couldn't have seen. And so they knew. And he told me, he said, I guess we made a mistake not telling you because by the time he and I were talking about this, I was doing this stuff.
Okay.
So I was doing it. Um, but anyway, so it grew from there. And then I went to England, in London
Mhm.
at St. James Court Hotel and ran into a ghost. And I have that story on my Nancy Jean's Garden. It's called Ghosts and Guides, and how I ran into a ghost and then tried to turn everything off and found out I couldn't turn my power off. It was too far gone. Uh, but that I never met my guide. When people say, want to meet your guide, to me, that was like meeting a ghost. No, I don't care. I mean, they're there, they're doing what they're
Mhm.
supposed to be doing. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I didn't meet
Mhm.
my guide till I was 68.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I went to the Many Lives, Many Masters guy whose name's escaping my brain completely, but he had a weekend seminar.
Brian Weiss.
Brian Weiss. I went to Brian Weiss. I went to a weekend seminar in Austin, and that man mass hypnotized 800 people 5 times in one day.
I've been to one of his classes and I know how that works. It's
And
amazing.
so,
He's
so
amazing.
he said, "You're going to meet your guide." And I was like, "Sure, I am." Anyway, that I met Addie, who was my guide, and she'd been a special soul that had chosen to come back in a human form, and she came over on a slave ship from Africa. She came with her people to keep them safe, to help them, because she knew they had to go through this traumatic thing. Anyway, she was all dressed up in the pictures you see with the white apron and the white turban and all that stuff. And I realized when I was in that vision that he had hypnotized us into, I looked at her. I said, "Hi." I said, "Are you my guide?" And she went, "Mm." And I said, "Well," I said, you have a name?" And she said, "Yes, it's Addie." And we had a little bit of a talk. And I told her, I said, "I'm sorry I didn't pay any attention. I mean, I didn't come looking for you or anything before." And she said, it's okay. You did everything I told you to do. So I didn't care.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then I said, well, why am I here? And she said, I'm going to show you. So she walked me across this plantation kitchen, and the cupboards there are in the corners. They're not square out cupboards like ours. They're like just the corners blocked off with big doors. And she said, open the door. And I opened it up, and it was a freaking mess. I mean, nothing was in order. It was just a jumble. If you were old enough to remember Fibber McGee's closet when they used to open it on radio, I'll stuff it to it. That's what it looked like. And I said, yeah. And she said, this is what you do. You help people open up the corners of their lives that are a mess and help straighten it out. That's your
Oh.
job. And when I told friends of mine who'd been around me for years watching me read, they said, that's probably the best explanation we've ever
Yeah,
heard of what it is you do. So while I was
that's great.
learning about that part of the world of woo, and I taught tarot and stuff, I ended up working in places that had crystals. And
Mhm,
they just fascinated me. So I would buy a few. And then I used to keep a big stack of fluorites on my table.
mhm.
And I would give people the little octahedrons,
Uh-huh.
you know, and that to me meant as above, so below, to the left, to the right, to the front, to the back. Bless me. And I'd hand it to people and I said, this is the sort of shape you can build around yourself with your own calling in of your own energy. And people told me that they would find that rock on the day they needed to remember something I told them. So I thought that's kind
Oh,
of fun.
interesting.
And then I got fascinated with all other sorts of crystals, and people started giving me crystals, and I just read up on them. But what really snapped me to what I do now
Hmm.
is I went to Denver with a friend of mine to see Radley Valentine speak, who's he does tarot decks, and I really liked his decks. And I went and I thought it was going to be like a big thing. It was like in the back of this bookstore, and there were like 12 people there. It was just like teeny tiny. And I talked to him for a while. But when I was leaving that store, I saw a preformed crystal grid with just the patterns that you can put the
Hmm.
crystals on. And I
Hmm.
asked the store owner, I said, what's that for? He said, oh, that's for gridding. Don't they do gridding where you are? And I'd never seen one. I mean, And so when I got home, I started reading up on them, and I realized this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I spent um, from that October until January. And finally, I went ahead and I built my own grid. And without, I read some books on it, but the books didn't make any sense to me. So I just
Hmm.
sort of instinctively started figuring out what went where, depending on the kind of power it engendered. And I built my first family crystal grid, and it was for prosperity and abundance and fun surprises. So within a day of my putting that grid up, I got a email from Dorothy Morgan, who's an astrologer that's a YouTube person. And she said, you contacted me this month in my emails, and I'm gifting you with a reading, which is something she does. And I thought, well, that's really nice because that's nothing I would have spent. I mean, spend your money on readers, guys, but I will. Um, so then and a friend of mine who was on the list, because I put friends and family on there, she called me up. She said, I got 2 job offers today. She'd been looking for 2 months and gotten nothing. And so we started watching it and we started keeping track, and it started paying off big time for everybody that was on the grid. And I went, that's, I guess, an affirmation of what I'm working on. When I did finally speak to Dorothy Morgan, I found out she had pulled my name out of her email lists 2 hours after the grid went up.
Oh my gosh.
So so then people started saying, can you build that for me? So I
Right.
started, and that's how I did them. I did them here face to face with the person. I've done a chamber of commerce, I've done, which was
Hmm.
really wild.
Hmm.
Um, but because when people were with me personally, I'd hand them, if you needed 6 stones, I'd hand you 8 or 9 and let you
Hmm.
feel them. And then you'd pick the ones that went in your grid because they were there for you. To me, stones have a very strong vibration. And if you
Hmm.
hold them, you can feel things from them.
Hmm.
And then when I started some book learning, and all my book learning is metaphysical. I don't know any geology. I know sometimes how they're formed just because I think it's interesting.
Hmm.
But anyway, that's how it grew. And then when the world decided to stop, my angels actually told me, it was about a year ago now. I was driving home from the wine bar where I used to read cards, and all of a sudden there was a gray mist around my car. And we don't have fog. I mean, you live where there's fog. We don't have fog where I live. And I went,
Right.
what the hell is this? And the voices said, you can't go out in this. If you breathe this in, you'll die. And I
Oh,
said, is this disease that's coming? And they said, it's not coming. It's here. You need to go home. And I said, for how long? And they said, at least a year.
oh my gosh.
And I got my second COVID shot a week ago. So my COVID shots will be completely working the week that I left a year ago.
Oh my gosh.
So listen to those little voices in your head. But
Right.
anyway, so I started learning, doing gridding and stuff. And I gave a grid to a couple of readers that I liked. I tried to give you one, Kim, but you don't answer your emails. and and I,
Well,
because
I kind of do and I kind of don't.
I know. She's like, rocks, I don't
I
know.
do eventually.
Yeah, I know. Well, I get the same way now. But anyway, they were encouraging me. They said, you need to go on YouTube. You need to explain what it is you do. We need to know about this. And I told them I didn't want to go out. And this was last summer. I said, I'm not going out till I feel safe and I don't do politics. And they said, oh, we got to do politics because, that's how we get people to watch us. And I said, I
Mm.
won't. And I don't. So I didn't start until December. And my garden is actually, I wasn't going to really, I kept thinking, oh, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. Yeah. I had a dream, and you can see at the beginning of my show, I walked up to this red brick wall and a voice behind me. There are always those voices. They're never nice. I never see them. They're just behind me. It said, paint the wall. And I realized I had a paintbrush. And as I painted the wall, it dissolved and there was a garden beyond it. And I said, what, what's my first thing was, what the hell kind of paint is this that takes down a brick wall? But then the second one was, what is this? And they said, it's your garden. You're going to create a safe spiritual place for people to come and learn all the things you know how to do. We've spent all this time training you. It's time for you to go. So that's Nancy Jean's garden. And that's what I do. I cover all kinds of weird stuff. I talk about my own personal journey about different things, like why I dyed my hair purple so I wouldn't be a highly dismissed little old white haired lady. And it worked. And I talk about my weight loss. I've lost over 100 pounds
Oh, wow. That's great.
since September of 19. Anyway, I talk about metaphysics, and I talk about how what I do in metaphysics helps me understand the whole world, and how I'm been sent now to give people messages about things.
So, Nancy, um, I'm gonna go back to one thing that you talked about, which is, and you kind of talked a little bit about that when you started to introduce crystals into your readings, into your tarot readings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what made you do that? Because was it an inspiration, or was it just like you just thought this is what I need to do? Because to me, crystals is a whole nother, it's like opening up a whole nother world, when you're already doing tarot, and that's kind of your world at that point. What prompted you to do that? Do you
Because
think it was
because people walk away from your table, and unless they've brought a friend or a tape recorder, they don't
Mhm,
really remember what you've told them. And I
mhm.
figured out a long time ago that those little bitty stones I gave away were like tape recorders, and they could hold them and they could play back the energy of the reading.
Oh, interesting.
So, and also, quite honestly, people come up to my table to look at I mean, I had some stones I didn't give away. I had some really magnificent things. Um, but when I also used to read in a vintage clothing store, and I'd have them on my table, and little kids would come up, and I'd say, if your mommy and daddy say it's okay, you can pick one, because they look a lot like Candy. They had to be kids of a certain height. And um, the kids would come up, like a family of three, and the kids would come up and they'd each pick a stone off. And I'd go, okay, the blue one's the talker, the purple one's the one that really sees things and understands one, and the yellow one you cannot contain. There's so much energy there. Chakra
Mhm.
colors. Kids go to their chakra.
Oh, interesting.
And then the parents would kind of go, that's weird. And I actually had parents come back when the kids weren't with them to be read because they were so shocked at how their kid could pick one stone and I could know so much about them. A lot of that's channeling because Addie works overtime on keeping me informed.
Hmm.
But so that's kind of how it blended together. And then, I
Right.
mean, who wouldn't be in love? Well, at the psychic fairs I worked, there are a lot of people who handle crystals. This
Hmm.
particular crystal has a gold coin in it. That did not
Oh,
happen in
wow.
the mountain. This gold coin was a Russian. It was from the last Russian dynasty. My husband used to wear it around his neck all the time. And then one day I noticed it was missing, and I said, "Bill, where's the coin?" And he said, "Oh, I just got tired of wearing it." And but for my Christmas present that year, he had hired one of my friends that worked with crystals to put the coin in there.
Oh, how nice. Oh my gosh.
And so I would keep that on my table when I read. And who's not going to come up and ask you about what this is? You know,
Right.
you know.
That's amazing. Well, now, Nancy, that's kind of what I wanted to touch on because I feel like there are a lot of people that are kind of like me. I wore my crystal just for you,
Mhm.
but there are, it seems like um it's a little bit like tarot cards for me too, where it's like if I learn the tarot cards, I've got to learn a whole thing, and if I learn crystals, I've got to learn a whole thing, and so I feel like a lot of people feel like that, so they're afraid to kind of dip their toe in. But what I kind of want to know is how would I? Let's start with if you're just a regular person who's just going about their life. What is a
Mhm.
very practical way to introduce crystals to your life? For example, if I was a real estate agent and I wanted to increase my sales and I wanted to use crystals to help me, what would I do?
You'd find some citrine. This was in the Middle Ages known as the merchant stone. See the orange? It's in the
Uh-huh.
same family as amethyst, but citrine gets hotter in the mountain, and so the same minerals then go gold in this case.
Hmm.
And in the Middle Ages, merchants would never go out without their piece of citrine with them.
Oh, really?
Yes, there's some stones that have a long, long history.
Uh-huh.
Some stones that were for protection. I have a big chunk of tourmaline. There's a lot of tourmaline in your area if you go in the rock
Hmm.
shops because it's made in the volcanic vents that are the things that make your ground rumble. And the tourmaline can be pink, blue, or black,
Hmm.
and mostly it's black. But I have a big solid tube. It almost looks like a big chunk of funny looking coal by my front door, and it's a guardian stone. So what you do is you say, okay, what would my life need? What would Kim want at this point in her life? And if it's to be soothed, you can Google soothing calming stones, and you'll find tons of articles telling you different stuff.
And then, so that's, I guess that's my question is when you, so if we are talking about the real estate agent who wants more sales and you say,
Hmm.
this is the stone for you, this is the merchant stone, this is
Right.
the stone
Hmm.
for you, then what does she do with it? Does she wear
Well,
it? Does she hold it?
it depends on how woo she is. How woo are you? Um, I you hold it in your non-dominant hand, or if you're
Okay.
ambidextrous, like my poor little Amazon driver who was fascinated by some stones I had outside my front door, and he said, "I'm ambidextrous." I said, "Then pick a hand." Um, but you put it in your
One
non-dominant
hand.
hand and you hold it and you start to get feelings off of it. And I had a lady who wrote me yesterday on my channel. I just did a show on which Claire are you,
Uh-huh.
and I went through all the things, and she said, I can't do any of those things. And she was explaining to me how hard it is for her to concentrate because she takes medicine for her depression.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, try again and just don't let your own mind talk you out of what you're feeling. I think that's where most people miss their intuition. They go, oh, pshaw, that can't be there.
Right. Absolutely.
I had no choice. I saw a ghost in a hotel room. It was there. It wanted to
Right.
hurt me. I was out the door.
Right.
Um, so anyway, so you just hold on to the stone, and then when I do talk a little bit about programming stones, but that's one reason why I started building grids, because trying to teach people how to program one stone, first of all, they get frantic if they lose it. And if you lose a stone, it means that vibration, that frequency need to be taken away from you. You will find the next one. Don't
Okay.
freak. I mean, unless you have a kleptomaniac in your family.
Okay.
Which case they're taking the stone away from you. That's their destiny. But anyway, you hold the stone, you get tied into it. In the case of a real estate agent, you put it in someplace maybe prominent where you can keep your eye on it, but near your desk, and just say, "Do your thing,"
Hmm.
because that's its thing. I mean, citrine's to bring in money,
Okay. And
and
so
amethyst is to cool, and I mean, all those things.
I say, and all those things. Well, and then for someone like me who's a reader, how would I introduce crystals into my readings if I wanted to? Because I don't use cards or anything. So
I
how
know, I
could
know.
I introduce crystals? How the way that I read, how could I introduce crystals?
Well, if you started working with crystals aside from when
Hmm.
you're reading,
Hmm.
you could say this has the energy of, well, I'll show you. You're going to get a gift from me.
A gift from Nancy.
Yes, you're going to get a little
Nancy.
box with 3 crystals in it.
Oh, how cute.
This one is kyanite,
Uh-huh.
and kyanite's very cool. It's very calming. It's very angular, and this one's cool because it's got a little traveler on it. When you get a stone and it has another of its kind growing off it, that's called a traveler.
Okay.
Um, quartz are ranked if they have travelers. This is kyanite. Kyanite cools, calms, and brings the temperature down in pretty much all situations. And it works with your higher energies.
Hmm.
The other stone that I gave you that I decided you really needed, this is smoky citrine. And it's like a brown, but it's a citrine, and it's the most beautifully clear crystal. You can see through it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And then I found these are teardrops of Himalayan quartz.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I thought,
Uh-huh.
you work with the top of your head a lot, so you need something from the
Yeah.
top of the world.
Yeah.
Um, that would be my alignment if I were to. I've packed up a couple boxes. I have a friend who's recovering from. He's going into a second round of treatment for cancer, and I'm sending him some calming rocks and some rocks that help him center into his body. So because I've had I had a cancer scare, and what you do is your energy just flees your body because it doesn't want to be there, and you can't heal unless you get the bits and pieces back together.
Right.
So there's a lot of. I did build a grid for a woman who ran an insurance agency, and she was switching from doing straight business insurance to doing more kind of life and investment kind of insurance. And one of the things she was having trouble with was breaking away from everybody expecting her to run her business like she always had. So I gave her in her grid, I put some black obsidian from a volcano in Mexico. She happened to be of Mexican heritage and appreciated that. But black obsidian, it's glass. I mean, it looks like it's just black glass, and it's sharp. It's what Indians used to make arrowheads and stuff out of. You have to be really careful if you have that in a grid because it'll cut you, but it also will cut all energy that's coming in that's negative.
So now that's the other thing is that it's they serve so many purposes too, crystals do.
Right, they do.
To me, it's almost they're almost like nature's batteries in a way. They
They
kind
are.
of fuel up things that need fueling in you situations. But they also can do what you just described, which is kind of protect, stop things from
Mhm.
coming in. And so is that how most like Native Americans, is that how they would use them, is to stop things from coming in? Or did they use them, was it for both? Did depend on the culture? Would they use them?
It depends on the culture, and it
Uh-huh.
also a lot of the shamans use it because it's Mother Earth and Father Sky, and that's where you can handle a part of Mother Earth that's um, very precious. Um, Have you ever seen a desert rose?
Yes.
Okay. The story among Native Americans is that each one of the desert roses, each of those little ones on the ground, has a spirit guide inside of it. And if you take it
Oh,
home and nurture it, the spirit guide will help you, but it can't ever leave the rose.
oh, okay. Oh, interesting. I like that.
There's a lot of myths about
Yeah.
different crystals. The
Uh-huh.
all the all-purpose crystal of all time is quartz. But then
Okay.
within quartz, there's smoky quartz, and there's rutilated quartz, which happens to be the sort that has little strips of metal. It almost looks like little shoots of gold through it. Um, Having a problem getting that out of Brazil right now because they've closed the mines because of COVID. But there's certain parts of the world that different crystals come from, and they're more prized. I use a lot of amethyst points. I'll
Mhm.
show you one of my grids where I used an amethyst point. But an amethyst point looks like this. It's amethyst, and some are darker at the one end than the other.
Oh,
A
right. Uh-huh.
quartz, amethyst is really just a quartz with more color. And oh, this one's good. Okay, no, maybe not. Anyway, they've got different colors in them, and those come out of South America. And you learn that I did a grid for someone who is fascinated with peridot, because peridot, it's made here on Earth. At the biggest place that's cranking out peridot right now that's natural is volcanoes in Hawaii. I don't know what's in the
Mhm.
mineral mix there, but that's what's coming out. But in the case of this person, she channels aliens, and they kept telling her that her clients that wanted to reconnect to their alien ancestry needed to get peridot. And she goes, "What's the deal with that?" And it's because peridot is one of the first gems ever made. It's actually called olivine. That's the other word for it. We get meteors that come from outer space, from the far reaches of outer space, that when the meteorites that hit, and they have peridot in them. I actually saw one
Oh,
where it was sliced like like you could slice rocks and make,
uh-huh. Right.
and you could see all the peridot in it, all these little green windows.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I said, and when I
Oh,
told
that's
her,
amazing.
she said, "Well, no wonder that makes sense. There's a couple of other gems that come in that can
Uh-huh.
come in right in on a meteorite. Most of peridot you see in the U.S. or in Afghanistan. That's the other. U.S. has it. Afghanistan has it. Madagascar, I think, has it.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it. And when you see it from those places, that's our peridot. But every once in a while you can find, and there are people who make gems and rings and things out of meteorites.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not just this world, it's the other world, but that happens to be one of the earliest gems that ever formed.
Oh, wow. So, and I think about the power in that. I'm like, wow, would I be ready for something like that? But what about when you are very attracted to certain stones? Because for me, the stone I'm most attracted to is I guess this is rose quartz.
Yes.
It's like a pink. And
Yes.
so what is it? And this is in the shape of an angel. Someone sent it to me. But what does it say about your? Are you lacking something? Is it what you're just
No, you're
what you're
drawn
full
to it. You're drawn to it. This is my rose quartz. My
Oh,
rose quartz
well,
will
you
speed up
dwarfed
your
mine
aging.
already, Nancy.
Rose quartz is a very special stone. It fades in the sun, so you don't put that in sunlight.
Okay.
Amethyst also fades in the sun. Rose quartz is a calming rock.
Mhm.
It it's called kind of a mother rock. It's
Okay.
comforting. It's a
So
thing.
if I'm attracted to it, does that mean that it's something that I'm comfortable with? Like I'm aligned with it? Is that why I'm
It means
attracted to it?
it's aligned with your heart chakra, and it means your heart
Mhm.
chakra is open, and it's
Okay.
attracted to something that's like, it's law of attraction except with rocks, like draws like.
Mhm. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's talk about, I want to get to your grids because I want to talk more about your grids. And
Okay.
you've mentioned them here and there, but I want to talk about, tell us about the dragonfly spirit animal, because that's kind of how you talk about it as
Yes.
starting your grids. So talk about that a little bit.
Okay. All over the world, the dragonfly is symbolizes change, transformation, and adaptability and self-realization.
Mhm.
Thus, the change is often referred to as the source of the mental and emotional maturity and understanding that deepens the meaning of life. And the reason the fly is viewed that way is because it starts in water, in emotion, and then it
Okay.
lives in intellect, in the air. And
Mhm.
one of the myths about dragonflies is that they were designed sort of like helicopters, like hovercrafts, so little angels could ride on them and tell them where to
Oh,
go.
cute.
But I'm fascinated with dragon. They also have
Right.
all the colors in the gem world are in their wings.
Oh. Oh,
And I mean,
wow.
if you've ever been around real, I used to go to a summer camp where we had real heavy duty dragonflies, and
Uh-huh.
they can have bright green bodies, bright blue bodies, even red. Um, and they can their eyes are set so they can see all around them.
Mhm.
So they're transformed from the emotion of the water. They come up, they start flying. They have a very fragile life, but they embody all the things we need in our own energy system for self-realization. So that's my dragonfly.
And that's kind of what you and that's what you used for your grids, right?
Not all, well, okay. I use for my grids. I use what I do is if you come to me and say I want to have a grid. When I
Mhm.
open up the Zoom meeting, I have 3 cards that I've pulled from usually well 2 different decks that Radley Valentine has, but I just pull the 3 cards before you come on. I write down their meanings in um, I keep these tarot journals, and I have a page and it's got your name and stuff on it. And I write down what 3 cards I saw before I met you. And then I tell you what those 3 cards, the story that those 3 cards tell me. Like today,
Okay.
there's a lady that last time I read her, this is just a reading client. She had the
Mhm.
4 of Swords in the middle. Well, now the 4 of Swords has moved to the past and she's moving
Oh, okay.
forward. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I look at that and I kind of see where you are. And that's sort of because a lot of the people, honest to God, a lot of people get grids don't know much about tarot. They just have seen this pretty thing and they felt power off of it.
Mm.
Then what we do is we lay out, and you think I'd be neat, but my office is a mess because I'm packing up 12 of these suckers to get out of here today. Um, I use this activation oracle deck,
Uh-huh.
which I now have I have, if you all can't read any of the text, I'm sorry, but that stupid thing of my right hand one, my right hand, and my left hand one, my left hand was making me nuts. So I fixed it. But the images on the cards are like this. That's the sacral chakra.
Oh, those are beautiful.
This is belief.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, they're kind of glary. Um, some of them are not roundy and cute. They're like, that's divine masculine.
Right.
This is passion.
Ooh,
And
I like
like for
this.
this, it's like the frequency of passion reminds us of that beneath every intense emotion, there's a hidden gem of insight, balance, and calm. So no matter how out there you get, you need to come back to this. It assists us in finding the balance within the intensity, moving us from the chaos into the calm,
Mm.
and where we can let ourselves go uh, for everlasting wisdom.
Mhm.
So, and then there's ones like this that are very abstract perception.
Right.
And it's like the frequency of perception supports natural curiosity, moving us beyond our comfort zone to find the edges where we can perceive and lets us decide to set our own boundaries. So that's what perception is about. So I actually, in the ones I have over here, I have a perception and I have a belief and I have a passion. So
Mhm.
the people who picked that, when we talked about it, it's really kind of where their life was. One of the grids I
Mhm.
did that was most, when I pulled the card, I was like, oh God, how the hell am I ever going to do this one? But it was called Transition. And what it was basically the S that normally the grids are, the sort of circular form.
Mhm.
And instead of being an S, instead of being a circular form, it had opened out. It was transitioning. It was actually moving.
Oh,
And
interesting.
the woman who did it, I felt like she was going through great spiritual awakening. And I said, you have spiritual leadership in your family. And she said, no, I don't know anybody. And she was thinking church and stuff. And I said, no, she was from a native tribe in Mexico. And it ends up, she went back and found out she did have shamans in her family. And
Oh, wow.
she was at the age where in her group, this is it, this is transition.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And she was transitioning into that role.
Oh, interesting.
So
So,
it's amazing, it's
yeah,
just like when you write things on the paper and people go, how did you know that? Well, you asked,
that's
first
out.
of all. It's one thing, is always be careful about the questions you ask the universe, because it's going to tell you what you want to know and what you need to know, even more importantly, what you need to know.
Right.
So
Right.
when I table read, I would go, what's going on around you for the next 3 months? Well, I had this guy that was on a Match.com date, and he sat down. He goes, what do I need to do in the next 3 months? And I said, is that really the question you want to ask? Because I could hear Addie going, no, no.
There's so much
and
more.
and he said, yeah, yeah. What do I need to do in the next 3 months? I laid down the cards, and I did not know this guy. He is actually from out of state. I looked at him and I said, you need to divorce your wife. The woman who was on the date with him didn't know he was married.
Oh
So
my
be
gosh.
careful about the questions you ask, because
Right.
especially, and I know Kim's the same way, we have to tell you what we see. If
Hmm.
we try to uh, if we don't remain valid to the visions we have, I mean, at least I know this for most readers I know, you start to lose it. I mean, you lose
Right.
your ability to read.
Usually what I do, Nancy, is when I get a piece of information like that where I know it's going to be controversial, I'll say,
Right.
remember, I'm just the telephone.
Yes.
I don't know you. I don't know
No,
anything.
no,
I'm just the telephone.
I told him, I said, do you want me to tell you the rest of the story? And he said, well, we've said this much. And I mean, like, my date's blown now. Why not? And it ends up that she's a lovely woman that where she lived, she was part of an art commune. He wanted to move. There was no
Mhm,
way they could move her career and his. And they still cared about each other, but
mhm.
they had just grown into two different places. And I just told him, I said, you just need to move on.
Right.
Now, what I didn't say that I did see, and this is where the telephone went, um, the reason he wasn't divorcing her was because he didn't like the property settlement. He wanted to keep his money. He didn't view that
Oh,
her being a supportive spouse was
oh, interesting.
so.
Well, now, um, going back to your grids, Nancy, just for a
Okay,
second. Um, so when somebody gets a grid from you,
right.
what do they do with it? Do they hang it? Do they keep it around them? Do they touch it, feel it?
The
What do
first
they
thing
do
they
with
do,
it?
they fire it up, which is a way of starting with the center rock and going out and touching each stone, and then going
Oh,
out and touching each stone, then going out and touching each stone till
mm-hmm,
you've touched all the stones together. Then you kind of build it like a spider web out. So you build this web of energy. And
mm-hmm,
people think this is crazy when I tell them. And this is what shocked me the first time I built my own grid. If you put your hand over the center of a grid that hasn't been fired up, it feels like your hand's sitting over a rock, right? It's there.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When it's fired up, it's literally fired up, it's warm or it's hot.
Oh, interesting.
And one of the readers that I did give to, she she put her hand over it before we fired it up, and she said it's already warm. And I said, that's because your energy's already been working with it. She said, I didn't touch it. I said, no, I'm not accusing it. It's already felt your ability to organize energy, and it's working with you. So when we finally did fire it up and she touched the center stone, she got a shock up her arm.
Oh,
And she said, is that normal? And I said, is touching rocks to make your life better normal? No.
right.
But I can't tell you
It's
what.
all abnormal.
I mean, it's not abnormal. It's just there's not a great methodology to it. But you try to do
Right.
the best you can to encompass your energy with the energy of the grid. And like my grid, my family grid, I fired it up online. I After I moved, I brought it out and said, okay, I'm going to build my family grid. And I did it on camera and I talked about it. And I fired it up and it got warm. And that was in December and it's still sitting over there. I checked it the other day. It's still warm. You don't have to, once you get it going,
Interesting.
theoretically, it just
Yeah.
goes. And it's like a little power generator behind you. It's like a little extra piece of the universe that you pulled in to help you.
And when you have something like that and your energy's working with it, something that caught me earlier that you talked about was the fact that um, it's almost like crystals work with you to evolve you,
They
to
evolve.
make you more than. Um, they
Crystals
evolve.
evolve.
So and so they're an evolving uh, mineral, I guess, or they're an evolving
Well,
rock. And
okay.
so how do they? So they work with us in our evolution as well.
Right.
Okay.
If you look, there's a guy named Rory Duff. It's Rory and Duff, and he's a Brit, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a geobiologist. He's watching how the world grows,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking about in December. It was December 10th. We hit an energy wave in our trip through the galaxy that we've hit before. We hit it 12,000 years ago, we hit it 24,000 years ago, and we hit it 48,000 years ago. That's why the scientists, as they were following the Earth's heartbeat, were aware and they've always known it could come up. That happened to be the day it happened. The reason they know it happened all those times ago is it actually changed molecular structure in rocks. So if
Oh
energy
wow.
is sweeping over us that can change rocks, what kind of energy can sweep over us and change us? We only use less than 10% of our DNA. The rest of it they used to call junk DNA, and they're starting to learn it's not junk. But there's some people who believe that some of the energy shifts we're going through are firing up DNA to improve us. But this crystal, you can see it's got a lot of lights, inclusions, and planes and stuff. When I first got it, it was a clear wand. It was a clear wand. And after December 10th, there are all kinds of inclusions and planes and stuff that have hit it. And I don't know why, but I'm keeping it here.
Oh,
I'm
how
going in.
interesting.
But so they grow. Somebody asked me, you talk about crystals like they're alive. Well, they have energy like we have energy, and it's energy we can exchange.
Right, right.
So
And that, yeah, that makes sense to me.
it's, but that's kind of how it works. And I mean, it works if you work it. You could take any stone and make it into something. I do a thing where I paint river stones, those things you get at the decorative center for your garden. And I paint them with gold and pile 8 of them by the front door, and it brings in prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's acknowledging our connection to all the life that's on the earth.
And does it have to do, does, because as we know, like with manifesting, intention carries energy. So does your
Right.
intention matter when you use crystals as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like doing a new moon list. It's like all the other things that carry intentions. The difference
Right.
between a crystal and those things is it's concrete, it's part of the physical world. And the
Right.
other thing is you can cleanse crystals. So I always warn people when you get crystals home, cleanse them because you don't know whose energy's been on them. So you can sage them.
Right.
I kind of discourage people from using water unless they know the crystal, because water can really corrode crystals that look like that wouldn't hurt them. It'll melt a selenite. It's a gypsum. It'll melt this stuff. It'll make the surface less shiny and stuff. Um, so, you can
Okay.
sage them. You can use anything. You can use sound. You can use a singing bowl to cleanse them. You put them
Oh,
in the moonlight if you
okay.
live in a neighborhood where they're going to be there when you come back. Um,
Uh-huh.
You can, I don't suggest putting them in sunlight because there are certain crystals that sun will fade. You can
Okay.
do, well, you've never, have you ever read cards, Kim? Your sister does, right?
I do use them. I'll use them, but very loosely. I know that no, I don't know. I kind of use them intuitively. I don't really use them in a traditional way, and I don't use them normally. I use them in my private readings sometimes to move them
Sure.
along a
Okay.
little
Yeah.
bit, or if I get stuck, I'll use them. But that's really all. Yeah.
Because, there's one thing that a lot of readers do is they clap sharply over a deck to clear the energy away, or they tap it hard. You can do that for a
Oh.
crystal. You can drive,
Uh-huh.
if your intention is clean this, that'll work too.
Right. Okay.
So anything.
And then the other thing I have to ask you, because I showed you my tiny rose quartz and you showed me your huge rose
Hmm.
quartz. So does the size of it matter,
No.
or is it just what your preference is? Okay.
What's your preference? What you can live with? After we show you my big grids, I'm going to show you some small grids I'm working on right now that we're going to have out soon.
Okay.
And they're just
Yeah.
every bit as powerful as these big guys.
Right. And oh, well, can you show us show us some of your grids? Show us what they
Okay.
look like and kind of.
What they mean? Yes. Okay. This is a grid called Remembrance, and it is supports the memory of everything we've gone through in this soul body. It provides us with information and tools to improve our journey. And I can tell you what's in here. The big pink round things, pink rhodite, and that resolution of issues, facilitating change. That's really what that stone means. And it's clarity and change. And the thing that's in the middle, the little dot, that's a serpentine. Normally serpentines are green. This one happens to be white. And it's to the retrieval of old memories, building wisdom. And then lepidolite are the two guys on the bottom here. And they release and reorganize your energy. And the amethyst points are the feathery looking things around the side. Those are spiritual values, meditation, and spirit protection. Then the guys in the middle here, those are crocodile jasper, and they calm your mind and relieve your stress, and they improve your wisdom. And then the bright blue guys are amazonite, which are wonderful. They heal trauma, they bring peace to anxiety. So if you know someone who has a lot of anxiety, oh, Kim went away. Kim went away. Okay. If you know someone who has a lot of trauma in their life, amazonite's a good thing to give them. This chevron, some of these that are at the top and the bottom, they also are leading the spiritual values forward.